Hello, Simone. I'm excited to be here with you today. Today, we are going to be discussing two very interesting studies. The first looks at how much men and women want and value romantic relationships, showing that men have an overwhelming preference for romance and romantic relationships. We'll get into why that may be. And then in the second, we're going to look at how attractiveness affects the speaker price of scientists within various fields.
What?
'Cause in some fields, the more attractive they are, the higher they're paid. And within other fields, the less attractive they are, the higher they're paid.
Oh, I have to guess this before we go into it. And guess in the comments. Don't cheat. Don't skip ahead. I want to see if people get this right. Maybe like obscure scientific fields. I bet neuroscientists are really attractive. Just knowing what you've said about like people in the field, and also looking at like the people who work in the field. And I'm gonna guess that you know what? Also, archaeologists and biologists, I'm gonna say in general, really good. I'm gonna say historians and artists who aren't commercial, well, like like super modern artists, probably better off looking.
Well, let's see if you're right. All right.
Okay,
But we're
yeah,
going to
let's
first
do it.
start on relationships.
Yeah,
Um,
I think this is why I think this relationships thing is really important to explore. And I want to just talk with you, like in terms of what you think you would do as a man dating today, is that we can't solve the problem of pronatalism so long as women really don't have that much drive to marry men. And this is one of those uncomfortable issues where I do think that like both feminism and currently state support services kind of just really removed everything that used to make women be like, yeah, I'm probably better
I
off.
also think that the way women date causes them to form negative impressions of men and causes them to
Mm,
undervalue the types of relationships they might be able to get.
Unfair. Yeah, well, and
For
overfocus.
dating.
Like when I look at least progressive critiques of dating and relationships in social media, it's like, well, I don't want to be a mother to another like guy. Basically like if you take on a boyfriend or a husband, now you're
But that's
babying
not I look, I
from nuclear.
understand that that's what you perceive because you watch the Twitter people who are trying to make themselves look good, but the core problem women are having in terms of self-perception is if you look at, let's say, Tinder, where there's a famous statistic that less than 1% of women are swiping right on the average looking guy. The
Right.
vast majority are just swiping on a few guys. So this means that they are likely, even if they think they're in a monogamous relationship, sharing a partner. And that partner is going to, when he knows that they are very easily replaceable, as they are for the top attractiveness and earning men in our society, treat them in such a way.
That also
Um,
explains a lot because I was looking at some stats on my own on this front before we started and was really confused when the stats were reporting that more women than men report themselves as being in relationships. And I'm like, how does that work? Because I'm looking at the US where roughly it's 50-50.
but yeah. So
So,
what's happening is that women, and this is where you get this I hate men thing. And I think that
uh-huh.
we as men can like be like, oh, well, this is just, but some of these women, based on their experiences, may really have a reason to feel like every guy is cheating on them because they are
Because they
not.
kind of are.
Yeah, they are not moderated. They are not dating women who are men who are actually in their league. They are
Yeah.
in their sexual league with their marriage market league.
They're dating lazy as we've
Yeah,
talked about.
while also not considering that that lowers their value within the marriage market league later, further confusing them, right? But let's go into the statistics on this because there's other issues at play here as well. I mean, the other big one before I go into the statistics is that women can get most of the things that they used to get from a relationship from the state these days. The core things women often got from a relationship was security, support, somebody to help care for their kids. There is no reason, for example, that 73% of Black women today should be having kids out of wedlock. If you look historically, when there wasn't as much state support, the Black child rate out of wedlock in the 1960s was half the white child rate out of wedlock. It was 5% to 10%. So this is something that is downstream of these support systems, which create an alternative. As you pointed out, even if you're not talking about the ones who have kids, you can get this protection by the state for women. If you look at the people who actually like used shelters, for example, they are overwhelmingly women. If you look at the people who are on welfare, I remember I was looking once and it was like a crazy number.
Oh.
It was single mothers
Oh.
was the one who was eating it all up. Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, sure.
But the point here being is that Yeah, and find the real number on that because that's going to be interesting. But the point here being is that women have sort of become nuns to the state and the urban monoculture. It's like if they just dedicate themselves to it fully, they can receive, and people can be like, "Well, what about sex?" And again, you can just look at the statistics. While women might be into like weirder porn than men on average, as you can see by the monster aisle at most mainstream bookstores, the girl
The monster aisle. Come on.
if they that this girl F's monsters, like that's a whole not even one aisle. I would argue at most bookstores, it's like 2 to 3 aisles if you're talking about a large bookstore. Like if men flaunted a fetish like that, I think that they'd be pretty heavily shamed.
So, according to a Pew Research Center survey, 61% of women in the US reported having received at least one major federal entitlement benefit at some point in their lives, compared to 49% of men. So, more women, but not
No,
anything
hold on. What
violent.
you're not checking is how many are currently receiving. What about men are on it less? What percent of entitlements go to women versus
Okay.
not what percent of women and men are on entitlements?
On joint returns, women accounted for only 19% of combined AGI, and men paid 82% of the
What?
taxes. That's a adjusted gross income is AGI.
So wait, women only paid what percent in taxes?
24%.
Really? That's wild.
Yeah, but that was in 1979, so a lot has changed. I'm still going
I
through
would
counting.
be surprised if it hadn't moved maybe in the opposite direction.
I mean, maybe. And so when I asked what
What
percent of
if
entitlements go to women compared to men, it says women receive a higher share of entitlement benefits compared to men in the United States. Overall, receipt of entitlements, 61% of women have received at least one major
not
entitlement.
the
That's
answer?
the same one. I know, but that's what perplexes me.
And this is why I remember when I looked at this, I found that crazy high number and I was really surprised. And the way I got that crazy high number was looking at the percent of entitlements who were going to single mothers, which is what allowed me to calculate the number. All right, I found an answer here. A 2019 Urban Institute study found that around 65% of welfare money goes to women and about 35% of welfare money goes to men. So women get about double the amount that men get. And I had
Regardless, women, I think the big thing is that women know they can fall back on the state. I think men can be far less confident of that being the case.
absolutely
Also, women are more able to legally fall back on men. So a man can't, for example, expect that if he ends up a father, he can just garnish the wages of the female partner, right? For
I
the
mean, it's very
woman,
much the
How could you make my son miss an entire semester of school? I mean, it's not like he's a hot girl. He can't just bail on his life and set up shop in someone else's.
so to keep going here, men strive more for romantic relationships. 61% of single men versus 38% of single women reported looking for romantic relationships in a recent US study. This study was romantic relationships matter more to men than women. Very on the nose there. 40% of men versus 28% of women had experienced love at first sight. A study of 100,000 US adults.
Wow.
48% of men versus 28% of women. That is wild. Did you experience love on first sight?
yeah, you did.
Told me that, but I thought it was more my profile that was the love at first sight thing than my looks.
No, it was your looks, and
Well,
that's even documented in my diary. You know that's true. You're just my type. You're so hot. When you get hotter, it's so crazy. Like when I think back at you, then I'm like,
No, I was not as hot back then.
you were at least twice, possibly 3 times as hot now as you were before. And it's actually just like on
True.
like truth on the subject of you being so
This is an obsession my wife has built up from replying to comments on this subject, so I ended up moving it to the end because I don't think it's relevant to this particular topic.
Yeah.
So
But anyway, yeah, love at first sight. I certainly experienced it. But yeah, I think it's important to also note, though, anecdotally, all this really resonates with me because where did we come into this, right? Our first date. You're sitting across from me saying, "I'm looking for a wife. I'm not looking to date," and I'm sitting across from you saying, "I'm looking only to date. And I'm going to live alone forever." Like we had very clear needs and desires and plans, and mine had nothing to do with long-term commitment to a man. And I think that's the thing is the BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement for women, is to be alone in many
No.
cases, especially when contextualized with mainstream society, because the benefits of being with a husband are not communicated anywhere. Anywhere.
it's funny that you mention all this because the people I was dating before you also like where I was finding people because you're like, what would I be doing in the modern context?
Yeah.
We look at the one who was our like groomsman at the wedding, so woman, but she was on my side because she was a
Mhm.
woman. So yeah, what would you call that? A female groomsman? Anyway, very cool, very successful, very accomplished. But I met her at the school's anime screenings.
Damn straight.
That is where I was looking for wives, right? Like back then. And
Mhm.
I understand that things have changed, but finding people within these, I was trolling for nerds. Like I was only going into places where I was going to find nerds because I knew I had a disproportionate advantage. When I would email people,
But I think you also wanted smart women who
well,
would
no, I mean,
intellectually
by signaling nerdy interests and attitudes and the way you dress and everything like that, you signal a perspective of your values and your environment. And it wasn't a perfect coalition was mine, but it was something that could be evolved into that over the course of, the 15 years we've been together. So I think that works maybe more when you're younger and that these
Yeah,
sorts of
no, it's not
environments
like
don't anymore.
yeah, yeah, unless you're Anna Valens and moving in your trans community of people who refuse to grow up. Because she seemed to have some anime group that she hung out with a lot. But
You could go to that group and find interesting girls who are tired of the BS. Like,
there, actually, yes. I mean, well, there are adult anime groups then, but actually, no. I think if when I'm thinking of anime conventions, modern anime conventions, there are plenty of single men and women in their 20s and 30s.
well, I mean, the key with an environment like that is one, they're going to be much more woke, so you've got to be careful about how you approach things. And two, you're in an environment where some people, like if you go to the anime like chain or the chain of like things where like Ren fairs are happening, and I've read a lot of things about like Ren fair workers, is there's like these basically like orgy parties that they do at both, and you want to avoid that crowd.
Yeah.
You want to find the chaste individual within the nerdy environment, which is a very good vetting mechanism.
Mm. Yeah. And they're there. They're always there. At least in my experience.
Men report falling in love 3 times on average versus women's 2 times on average. So what
That's
men are
really interesting. What's
Sep-
going on there?
well, look, they're not only have love at first sight at almost double the rate, but they
Yeah,
fall
but they're
in
also
love.
falling in love more. And this is so not the
Sure.
stereotype. The stereotype is the women so romantic, always old, mooning over someone when it's apparently the opposite. But really though, what's going on?
70% of couples agreed that the male partner said, "I love you" first.
Ah, that's also so not the stereotype.
Well, it's sort of like a proposal, right? Like I think men are. I always thought that men were expected to say it first.
You said it first to me, but you said it. I think I might love you.
You're rating you? I think I
No,
might love
no, no,
you.
no. The actual statement that you shared was, a little couch, but it was very cute. It was very, I was like,
You're sweet.
I didn't need to say anything because you already knew. I was like,
Madly
I was
in love.
enthralled. Yeah, didn't.
Yeah, no, when people can watch our videos about like my wife is less in love with me now, and like you may think I'm hotter now, but you're less like pathologically obsessed with me. You were like full on yandere in our early relationship, and
But I know, yeah, but I didn't do. I do way more things for you now.
no, you
I
do
love
do
you
like
more
more
now. I'm more
things.
committed to you now. I am more content with you now.
But you've also pointed out that because I've raised your status so much, our relative status differences like do genuinely require me stepping up more than I did in our early relationship.
That's true. Yeah, the ante has been upped.
And you're like, this is the way things are. Like life isn't fair, right? And you're definitely holding up your end of the bargain more. Like you're being pregnant with kid number 5 while being sick, while handling all this. Like it's just so intense what you're doing. We had what was NHK, the Japanese filmers here yesterday. I'm surprised nobody noticed in the comments that there
No,
were
2 people did. 2 people noticed.
in the antinatalism episode.
Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes. People never watch our favorite episodes. I'm like, I spend so much time.
It had a lot of comments when I went in and checked in on it today.
Okay. Men said, "I love you" an average of 42 days earlier than women. So they don't just say, "I love you" first. Damn, that's leaving somebody hanging right there. 42 days earlier is not okay. That's like just manipulative in my perspective. If you're not interested in a long-term relationship, just be like, "I don't feel that way about you."
Yeah,
Don't
just
like,
end it because you're wasting their time. It's really cruel to waste someone's time like
yeah,
that.
don't. This is even worse. It appears that they know they plan to say it eventually, but they just want to establish their power in the relationship.
Yeah, that's really uncool, this female tendency to act cool. And by that I mean have like literally a sort of chilly ice cold reaction and to not be impressed by anything they do and they're like, "Oh, I love this restaurant." Oh, it didn't actually get that good of reviews. Whatever, right? Just what is that?
Right.
It doesn't make you look good at all.
I agree. This whole like poo-pooing whatever, like, oh, not
Mhm.
that great. When I've also just talked about like the reason why a lot of men get in bad situations within this current dating market is they have no idea what the average woman looks like. They base it like I have heard that you are mid from like our channel or like lower, and
Mhm.
I'm like, you need to stop comparing my wife to other well-known YouTubers you watch and go to an airport.
For me, met mid and like an IRL, like higher because I'm not obese. But like in an age of filters and cosmetic procedures, and also in an age in which obviously like the most attractive people are between 21 and 23, I have to be.
No. Yeah, but what I'm saying is it helps men to reset their actual expectation. I've seen
Oh
some of
yeah, like how are you going to end up
We're
in a
I can't find a hot woman in the US who wants me, so I'm gonna go to, like, Latin America and look for a woman, and I'm like,
yeah.
"This isn't gonna work for you." Like,
Well, I
your
mean, it's
standards are
that's
way too high on attractiveness.
we've been talking about that, right? Like there are some people who are now like some people's approach to modern dating is okay, I'm just going to be a passport bro. I'm just going to find my Thai or Eastern European trad wife who's going to be younger, who's going to be very attractive, who yes, also is going to be smart.
It
Like
can be done, but, like, keep in mind the effects that that's gonna have on, like, this is the
and not
I
taking into account the hedonic treadmill as well, which we've
yeah,
seen play out in plenty of these types of relationships. They're
your
just
woman normalizes
unsustainable.
your life in the US and
Yeah,
it's
so, like, I get that, like, this is one approach, okay? You can do this, and then you just drop her when she gets old, you could just Leo DiCaprio it, right? Just keep going. And just, like, strong prenup or, like, marry in a homestead state, like, whatever it is that you need.
Yeah, but these are also the types of people who are more likely to, like, poison you if they think you're gonna pull that off.
I
Like, you've
mean,
taken them from their
yeah.
support network, you've put them in an incredibly vulnerable position, you've
Yeah.
had their backs against the wall,
Yeah,
and,
we're
like,
fortunate that the people we know who have done this
the
on a
Aqua
serial
Teen Hunger
basis have
Force
not died.
sitting here.
What's wrong, Carl?
Well, for starters, she fabricated herself inside my house. And every time I go to this like language, it's like, damn it, yelling at me or something.
But no, the point I was making about, like, go to an airport and actually look around and discount anybody who is significantly younger than you in age because they're just gonna look hotter no matter what, and then sort of try to build a normal. I might have an
Also,
episode
like,
where I do that.
I don't like, do you want a child? Like, you're basically marrying a child, meaning you also have to take care of it and
You
deal
mean if you're
with.
marrying a younger person. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Like, when I know, like, there are downsides too to marrying someone who's set in their ways. Like, waiting too long is also difficult because then they're gonna be a lot less flexible and willing to grow with you, and that also is a problem. But, like, this solution of just, "Oh, I'll marry a child," like, okay, well, then this is one reason why we didn't, like, we thought for a while because a lot of our friends were like, "Oh, you should get an au pair." Like, it's a great thing, cultural exchange, they
Young
watch your
women
kids.
are terrible these days.
But then, like, we have to, like now we have, not 4 children at home, but 5, and we have to, feed them and pay attention to them and help them through their homesickness and, take them out on outings and, like, no.
It's
We want a
miserable.
partner. We want someone to help us, and we wanna help them, but not, you
So when
know.
you're actually seeing this in the statistics here, because I think one of the things that people
Mhm.
aren't thinking about when they're doing the passport bro thing is you are very likely not going to be able to have as in-depth intellectual conversations with this individual as somebody who has the cultural similarities to you.
Fair, yeah. Even if it's just the cultural differences. So let's say that they're equally educated, they're equally,
No
like,
language difference, no
Mhm,
anything.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Just due to cultural framing differences, you're going to have a harder time.
Yeah.
And we it's in the data, 49% of men versus 20% of women claim their romantic partner with their primary confidant, US study. Wild, right? 40% of men to 20% of women.
Wow.
No, 49%. Sorry, almost 50% of men consider their wives
Thanks.
or their partners. Sorry, not even their wives. You are my primary confidant. I think it's a big problem that women consider people other than the men their primary confidant. I'd say that's a huge warning flag for a relationship. If the woman considers anyone other than their husband to be their
I
primary
just don't really see it as a marriage. If you're not actually integrating your life with someone intellectually, I mean,
confidant.
also professionally, I just and professionally can mean that maybe one person maintains the household and the family's finances and, like, does, like, back end admin for the family business or for, the partner who works. Like I still see that as a professional arrangement, but like separate jobs, separate careers, separate friends. Like this is, yeah,
Well,
I
no,
don't
but
know
it's
what
not
that
feel
is.
her out. If she is experiencing problems with the relationship, and the first person she goes to isn't her partner, but somebody else,
Yeah.
that somebody else can often have a vested interest, especially if they're a female partner with, the degree of intersexual competition to drive the relationship apart. And we repeatedly see this in the women who do something ridiculous and then go to their like, friend signal thread or whatever, and they're affirmed for doing the thing that anyone would know is ridiculous because the other women are just, either they're just insane or they're trying to tear them down.
Right.
And then men show stronger associations between relationship status and mental/physical health outcomes. So it helps you more in mental and physical health.
Yeah, I mean, so what the leftists that I follow on YouTube would say is that that is because women take on an uncompensated and unrequited burden of providing
I mean, I
mental
think you do.
support
I,
and
I
physical
think even
care.
if we pretend like you do as much as like I do as much as you do, it's obviously not true.
Well, when it comes to physical care, I 100% do more, but that's because it's kind of what women specialize in. So yeah, like I'm making you your meals, I'm doing the laundry, I'm, doling out medicine when people are sick. But and I think that's so it's to me obvious that men would be physically better off with women caring for them. But that is another reason why women are like, okay, so now I'm not caring just for myself, I'm caring for my partner and any kids that we have. Like, I mean, they'll happily take that on if it comes to it and they'll find it satisfying. Yeah, I mean, assuming that's a
I
good
mean, I think
relationship.
the raw deal that women get, even
Yeah.
in fairly, I mean, people might consider a relationship conservative or progressive. We're called like anti-egalitarian all the time by leftist media.
Whatever.
Even though we run our companies together, we do our podcasts together, we
What
do
you
our
gonna
books
do?
together, whatever.
Yeah.
Men are less likely to initiate breakups. Women initiate 70% of divorces. Women also initiate breakups more often in non-marital relationships.
Mhm. And men are more likely to get into a subsequent relationship more quickly.
Uh-huh. Well, and here you see men suffer more from relationship dissolution. 40% of men versus 20% of women report frequent loneliness during divorce year. Men's mortality risk increased by 27% after a spouse's death versus women's by 15%.
Well, and again, but also it's not just that women basically then the women, I think, often receive a little bit of a hedonic bump after ending a relationship because there are fewer logistical burdens in their
easier
lives.
for
But
them to gain.
beyond that, they have better support networks. Just period.
Wait, if they're primary confidant, whether their husband, then you immediately have somebody you can go to, right?
Yeah,
Like,
100%. Yeah.
with 15% of men having their wife as their primary confidant, obviously, or partner as their primary confidant, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
I'd also note here that there's this perception that like men are the sort of the abusive gender in relationships and they don't value women as much. But here you're seeing this giant increase in mortality risk in men you don't see in women after a divorce. This giant increase in loneliness risk, literally twice what women experience. And so I think what we're seeing there is that that's just a false narrative. And people keep pointing to the study that was withdrawn about men leaving their partners when they had a major injury or illness.
Mm.
And then the guy who released it withdrew it and said, I did the math wrong. It's not accurate.
Oh,
So what we actually see here is
because there are
women.
so many it's weird. There are many high profile examples of famous men who like left their wife as she was going through cancer. Like one of them is Brian Johnson. He was accused of that. And then there's some other guys who like politicians and stuff who criticize.
There was the
right?
Democratic Dean, Howard Dean.
Yeah, Howard Dean. That's right. Yeah. So what's up
There was
with
that
that?
famous actor, the director guy who divorced his wife via fax and then like married a maid or something. Oh no, a stepchild. I have to find out who that is. So the Phil Collins one was the divorcing his wife via fax, although he denies that that's what's happened. And the marrying the stepchild one was Woody Allen, and they make it clear that she was only technically a stepchild, and that Woody Allen had began a relationship with her mother, and this was the adopted daughter of that mother, although he never fully married the mother, even though he dated her for over 10 years, and then he started dating her adopted daughter when she hit 20. But, no, I think that what this is all of those men are far leftists.
Oh.
And I think if you adapt to the urban monoculture as a man, you're going to treat your wife significantly worse than if you don't, from what I've seen.
Why?
I think because you don't really have a set of rules for how women are supposed to be treated and you don't have a true moral center. So it's like, I want to good, therefore we're going to be polyamorous. I want to feel good, therefore, there isn't really a, oh, well, she'll be better off anyway. There's always a way to justify your decisions within the urban monoculture. Oh,
Yeah, or like, yeah, we've never really been integrated anyway. She doesn't depend on me. I guess, yeah, there's
yeah,
more, maybe there's more separation as well. Like we were never commingled. We always had a prenup.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
19% of men versus 11% of women report never having emotional support. So way more men than women, almost double the rate of men have never gotten emotional support from their spouse. And despite what the feminists will tell you,
That's
men were
wild.
times more likely than women to begin new relationships after becoming widowed or divorced. So women were six times more likely. So it's not like a little bit more likely. It's 6 times more likely. In the paper, they argued for this. I don't really buy a lot of these arguments. Men are socialized to avoid showing vulnerability. Of course, they've got to be like, they're socialized. And it's like, then why are the worst men the Democratic men? Why are the worst men the urban monoculture men, right? Like, why is it that the better husbands seem to come from these more traditionalist cultures? And the answer is because this is just wrong, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
showing vulnerability can often be used to manipulate other people. I mean, that's the beginning of emotional blackmail.
Well, and I also think that because I was looking at different argumentative styles between men and women are way more likely to use emotional appeals, but I think that's because it's manipulative.
Yeah, this limits men's ability to receive emotional support from friends and family. Consequently, men become more dependent on romantic partners for intimacy and emotional needs. Women maintain broader support networks beyond romantic relationships. I just disagree with this.
No.
This to me sounds more like the women having broader friendship networks seems to be a more modern thing. It doesn't appear intrinsic to women or anything like that. It doesn't appear downstream of vulnerability. It appears to be a tactic that the urban monoculture uses to pull people out of their families.
Right.
Because it's incredibly effective to create these all-female social networks where people go for validation and that can enforce alternate cultural norms than the one the family is adopting.
Yeah.
Would you say you have more female friends or male friends?
God, I don't know. I mean, how do we even define friends anymore? Male, probably, in terms of people that we
Yeah.
know.
I love that
Because
people are like,
I don't see gender, Malcolm.
people of different genders like can't be friends. I love that there's this perception, and I'm like, that is so not true for married people. Like after marriage, it becomes a lot easier to be close friends with somebody if one of you, even if like one person is single, and I think that this can cause sometimes unnecessary friction where people have too much phobia around this.
Oh, yeah, where they're like, "You're not allowed to," or "I'm really
I mean, I
uncomfortable
think they need to be
hanging out with."
mutual friends. Like for me,
Oh.
I actually feel safer with you having a majority of male friends than a majority of female friends. And people can be like, why
Oh,
would you?
because you think they'd, like, poison you against me. I
Well,
might, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking about the people that I chat with regularly the most, like, text with,
it's true. Yeah,
and
your long-term calls was like really childhood friends is more female. But like,
no, even new friends. Like, who do I text regularly? I text Diana Fleischman about her book. I text with the brilliant mother who I constantly talk about. I text with, like, honestly, other people who are female now that I think about it, but, like, they're the ones who chat more.
do they ever try to drive wedges in your relationship?
No, never. No.
That's why you
No.
need the female. Well,
The
okay, here's
discussions, maybe it's because they're all a little bit on the spectrum or, like, different
maybe
neurally, but, like,
your wife to be
our
on
conversations are so tactical. It's like, "Here's this study," or "Here's this method," or "Here's this piece of information."
so the answer is you need your wife to interact with women who have lots of kids and are in healthy relationships.
Yeah. Yes. All of these women are, if not married, no, they're all married. Okay. Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right. Well, now we're gonna get to the big mystery that I asked you at the beginning. This one is called,
Yes.
oh my goodness, key points from beauty premium for social scientists, but unattractiveness premium for natural scientists. This
What?
even the opposite of what you think. So I was wrong here. How attractiveness affects social scientists' value in public speaking while having the opposite effect on social versus natural
Oh my
scientists. Social
God.
scientists benefit from being attractive, while natural scientists actually benefit from being less attractive. Sample methodology: 739 public speakers from 8 North American speaker agencies, 217 full-time academics, 551 part-time academics, 366 non-academics. Facial features on a scale of 1 to 10 using geometric facial analysis. Speaking fees used as a proxy for quote-unquote market value.
Yeah.
I love that they're using market value as a term in this
I
incredibly
love
book.
it. Yes, this is a wonderful study. Applause to it, whoever did this.
Four key findings with supporting statistics. Facial attractiveness has no correlation with academic achievement. So this is the first one here, which is really interesting.
Interesting.
Because
Yeah.
generally, historically, what they found is that people who are more attractively more competent.
Yeah.
It might just be that there's an alternate pressure to like leave academia if you're more attractive and go into another field.
Fair.
Because attractiveness is correlated with intelligence overall.
Yeah, but also attractiveness is indeed correlated with these like higher salaries and stuff. So yeah.
I might be an academic if I was less attractive, for example.
Mhm.
I've
Yeah.
done that.
Yeah.
Attractiveness affects external visibility only where physical appearance matters. The significantly positive effects on TED Talk invitations, Google webpage mentions, NY Time bestseller lists. And so the Google webpage mentions 20% per attractiveness point, and on the NY Time bestseller list, plus 1 week per attractiveness point. That is wild. No significant effects on book publications or book awards where appearance is less visible. Opposite beauty premiums by field in speaking fees. Natural scientists, unattractiveness premium, significant negative effect with a p-value of 0.011. A 19% increase in speaker fees. So, oh no, for each 1 point decrease in attractiveness.
Whoa. What?
So it's huge.
So the more misshapen you are, the more cachet you have as a potential speaker. They're like, oh yeah, they look really messed up. Let's have them talk to us about biology, natural, what, like geology. What are we talking natural?
Think about like Stephen Hawking or like Einstein or something. Like the archetype we have is somebody who is not traditionally attractive, even though Stephen Hawking was originally quite attractive.
Yeah. Well, this is what's so weird to me. Is like I remember in the halls of academia, like when we were talking with or just hanging out with people at different departments. Like I remember the geology people, very attractive, but like party animals, like very rugged party animals, like get dehydrated digging all day and then just and same with archaeologists. And then I don't know, you'd think like neuroscientists were often just like
Yeah, I remember neuroscientists being fairly attractive, but maybe that's wrong from this. Now, if we go further here, social scientists beauty premium. In business fields, you have a really big one.
That makes sense.
In effect, 0.034. Well, in the other social scientists, you have a highly but not enormous of 0.364. So
think about Diana Fleischman, she is very attractive and she's in the social sciences, right? And like she is a more public facing kind of person.
Oh, sorry, I gave the wrong numbers there. It was B 0.204, P 0.034 for business fields, and then for other social sciences, it was B 0.364 and P less than 0.001. So this would mean it's bigger in the other social sciences. I spoke wrong. Non-academic speakers with science backgrounds show the same pattern. Natural science background, unattractiveness premium. Social science business, beauty premium. Social science others, beauty premium. Key insight. Stereotypes drive market value. These findings suggest that public stereotypes about nerdy or geeky natural scientists create a market where less attractive natural scientists are perceived as more credible, competent, while social scientists benefit from conventional beauty premiums. Appearance versus substance. Despite no correlation between attractiveness and actual academic performance, there is, by the way, there just isn't within academia. The speaking market rewards different appearances for different fields, indicating that public perception, not academic quality, drives these premiums. The ugly Einstein effect. The paper references the cultural Cartesian dualism, where people believe you can either be physically attractive or intellectually brilliant, but not both, particularly for natural scientists. And this is a phenomenon that you and I have taken advantage of before. Remember the study on glasses and hair lengths? You're going to go into that?
Yeah, that in general, people with shorter hair and people who are wearing glasses are seen as less attractive, less approachable, but more intelligent and more competent. And both men and women, one without glasses, but two with like long hair that's down, are seen as more attractive and more approachable. So I guess like the Jesus hair or the Fabio look are but they're also seen as less intelligent and competent.
It's funny, I definitely don't see men with long hair as approachable. I always think that they're going to be a creep.
Yeah, but then again, you have the Fabio thing. Like, how did that happen? Because I never got that.
Might be urban monoculture brain people because it's being collected from students and stuff.
Maybe. I just perceived it as this subconscious association with feminine traits and beauty, regardless of the person's actual gender. It's like, oh, if it looks more like a woman, it's gonna be prettier and dumber. And if it looks more like
I
a
don't
man,
buy
it's
this.
gonna be smarter.
I think it's about urban monocultural social norms, the long hair and
Maybe.
the glasses. I don't think are about urban monocultural norms. I think everybody generally assumes people with glasses are competent but less approachable. I mean, you don't really need your glasses that much, but you still wear them
No,
based on
I
this.
don't.
When you first
I really
read
don't.
these studies, I do think that people, men and women, view women with shorter hair as more competent, which is why you cut your hair after that study. You used to have
Yeah.
super long hair, like hippie hair. And then after
Ryan Kaplan.
Brian Kaplan came on our podcast and was like, "Hey, for your audience, you should probably grow out your hair." And now you've grown out your hair.
No regrets.
You
I
used to
like
always
it.
tell me how much you hated your longer hair when you had short hair because it was so easy to maintain.
Oh, it's very easy to maintain. It is. It is.
Well, I mean, do you want to go to wigs?
Ew, no. Yeah, that's and I mean not you do wigs, whatever you do, but like I don't want to do wigs, and I'm fine with my hair the way it is.
I love you to death, Simone. I am very excited for dinner tonight.
Yeah, I'm gonna make you your
Death door, so we're doing mac and cheese.
delivered to your room, right?
I mean,
Don't come down. Rest. Okay. I've got the kids. It's
I'll
fine.
get paid, okay?
That'd be great. That'd be wonderful.
Then I'll just lay down and go to sleep. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're gonna sleep the whole time, should I not interrupt you then?
No. Wake me up to eat. I mean,
Okay. Then I'll just drop food by, and if you're asleep, I won't wake you up, and then you'll just wake up, and there will be mac and cheese.
yeah, 'cause I wake up very frequently when I have the flu. It's like 20 minutes and then I wake up in a puddle, and then 20 minutes and I wake up in a puddle of sweat, and then sweat, puddle of sweat. And I moved. And then by the end of the night, the whole bed is just soaked.
You're gonna have like 2 more nights of this, and then when you're with the kids on one of the weekend sessions this weekend, I will just wash your sheets real quick. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Because I know it's so stinky, it's so gross. I know I hated that. Sorry.
I just feel like a rite of passage, no need to contextualize things as negative. It's a different experience of what it feels like to be alive.
Yeah, well, that's why it just
very
I
different.
constantly think of this one part. It was like this random like one-off mention in one of Ian Banks' Culture series books where like one of the main characters is hitching a ride on a spaceship and meets someone who is exhibiting strange behavior because this isn't a post-singularity sci-fi world where no one gets sick anymore. But on this particular ship, the human passengers had decided to take turns getting a virus because they heard that used to happen to people back in the day and they would feel comparatively so awesome after that it was like worth trying. And now whenever I'm sick, I try to pretend it's one of those
I don't
people.
even think you need to focus on the after. So I have a flu right now, right? Like, and I can contextualize this. And we always talk about you contextualize what you feel, right? Like I can contextualize this flu as like really negative because it causes discomfort and pain in some areas of my body. But it also causes interesting sensations I don't normally feel,
Yeah.
like a chill in my teeth, which is a very interesting thing to focus on.
You get to feel that one.
I find this particularly interesting because it's one of the only times in your life you really get to feel the nerves in your teeth, except when you're in immeasurable pain due to like a dentist or a disease or something like that. So it's interesting to meditate on. A couple other things that I recognized after this was, one, I feel almost no arousal when I'm at this level of illness, which is very interesting, and often no desire to do some other things that I often do, like play video games. The entire time I've been ill, I have had no interest in playing video games. And I'm sure this is like evolutionary, so I don't spread this to other members of the tribe, and I don't go out and try to fight a war when I'm super sick, or at least don't get excited about it. But like, is there not great utility in having a period of my life where I can sort of explore the world through the perspective of somebody who doesn't like video games or feels arousal? And another one is that because I'm like waking up all the time and I'm having these fever dreams, it caused me to ask a question that I'd never asked before, which is, why are dreams so disrupted by something as pretty much insignificant as a fever? And it really got me meditating on the concept of dreams and sleep. And Simone also asked, why does the sweat from a fever smell so bad? And I was pointing out to her, well, that's probably evolutionary as well, to tell other members of your tribe that you have an illness and to not come near you, or at least to be able to detect that in other individuals. Maybe it's not an active signal. And it also, gets a different experience of what sleep is like. I get to experience fever dreams, which are unique, if not, entirely pleasant in a traditional sense. And I can sample this new way of being human. But I think more than all of that, whenever I have a flu, my mental state is quite differentiated from my mental state when I don't have a flu. It's probably as different as being drunk versus not being drunk. Not in the same direction, but it is definitely an
Yeah.
alternate mental state where I approach things much more slowly, deliberately, and methodically. And that could be an interesting time to think about things. I've written some really interesting things when I had a flu. So I'm not,
And go out of your way to orchestrate uncomfortable and slightly compromised mental states because it does help you like avoid distraction. Like you'll wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning because
yeah.
you're only half awake. Your brain is desperately trying to get
Yeah,
you.
this is something I seek out because the
Yeah.
differential mental states allow me to produce differential work within different domains.
Yeah.
And sort of hunting for these, and a flu is one of them. And I think that this is the thing, like, you get to choose whether you experience life negatively. You get to Adam's Family it. Your contextualization of your emotional and physical state is always a choice at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And we've talked about this. We actually saw a new study on this recently about trauma. And again, it's more perception of trauma in youth than actual
Mhm.
trauma in youth that correlates with mental problems as an adult.
Yeah. Well, it's specifically like this was a Spencer Greenberg team follow on to CDC reports that something like I think 63% of people who reported experiencing adverse childhood trauma or events, basically childhood trauma, also reported depression and anxiety. However, when they did more digging on this subject, they found that experiencing these things only explains like 10% of it, something along those lines. You can read it yourself. Go to the Clearer Thinking with like I think their blog. And what they didn't dig into, which we've seen in other studies, like this one Nordic study, is that when you look at people who report adverse effect or events in their childhood, they're, yes, absolutely much more likely to report anxiety and depression. But when you look at what's actually documented in court cases, we're like, okay, this person clearly experienced real trauma that is documented. And we know because, like the legal system got involved. If they didn't actually report it, they also were not very likely to report having problems in the moment. So that's why we've sort of come to this conclusion that a lot of it.
No, no, no. It was that the people who did experience verifiable trauma as a child, but didn't remember it as an adult, did not have negative or did not contextualize
It
it.
wasn't didn't remember it. It was just didn't report having it.
Didn't contextualize it traumatically.
Yeah.
And it's the opposite direction. People who didn't experience genuine trauma as a kid, but contextualized normal parent stuff as trauma, ended up having all these negative outcomes.
Yeah.
And this is something that is, so one, super important from a mental health perspective to understand that trauma is something that's incepted and contextualized. And I would definitely, if you look at my childhood, I would have a lot of trauma from a generic standpoint. I went to like prison alternatives at 13. I never lived with my family again after that. I was in fights constantly within, the pseudo prison system. These are for kids. They have these private prison alternatives. Think Holes is a very good depiction of one of these. They're in the desert and they're often run by Mormon extremists. And they send some kids there, like instead of it, and it might have been a Cash for Kids thing. We don't know because I don't really think I did anything that warranted going there. For context of what it's like at these places, I would have been around 13 at the time. And by the time I got out, I was either at, I can't remember, either 65 or 75 pounds, obviously extremely malnourished. You could just see all my bone structure was crazy. When I got there, they would do strip searches and cavity searches. And, most of the time you're there, they have armed guards. For people who don't know what this is, it was something called so the troubled teen industry is something that's been used more broadly. But in the 90s, a portion of the industry began to be used by judges in the United States as an alternative to sending kids to juvie when juvie became overcrowded. The reason I ended up getting sent, largely speaking from what I can tell, is my parents were in a divorce and neither of them wanted the other to get custody. So they both convinced the judge that the other was such a bad parent that I would be better off living with the government than living with them. And so the government just assigned me to a prison alternative instead of living with either family. And most of these facilities have since, due to the high number of suicides in them and the abuse allegations, because they were pretty much like the adult private prison industry, except there was virtually no oversight at all. They've mostly been shut down. There's a 75% reduction in them since the 90s. So it's not really a thing anymore. But a good depiction of them is the movie Holes, as I mentioned. How bad they were it's hidden for a long time because the industry was really divided into two sections. One was the court-appointed alternative to prison, like a private prison industry for youth. And then the other was for like rich kids, like Paris Hilton went to one. And so there was a lot of like movies and Netflix shows about the ones for rich kids, which were very, not nice, but at least, nobody was actually, killing themselves on property or anything like that at high levels, which was not the case at the ones that the government was sending kids to. And after that, I never lived with either of my family again, ever. I would say until after college, but I didn't live with either family until after college. Lived on my own after college. As for some fun anecdotes I can throw in, because I really, really don't want to do a full episode on this, at the one that sort of like holds the wilderness type, because there's various types of these, and I went through a cycle of them, just because I wasn't going home. And the ones that are more like that, I have this vivid memory of some of the kids were running away into the desert. And, well, I mean, we knew. They told us that nobody really ever makes it away because, there's miles of desert in every direction. And you could hear on the radio, and they were chasing the kid down with like hunting dogs and like jeeps, and all the other kids were cheering because we could hear the progress on the radio. Hoping the kid. Obviously, he didn't get away, but it was a funny, vivid memory for me. Another one was when I went to one of the school varieties that they had, because obviously you can't just stick a kid for however many years in the wilderness. There was an instance where a teacher threw a kid through a closed window. And I remember that one really vividly because I was like, whoa, man, like that's crazy. Like even going through that, I was like, that's crazy. At the school one, the other thing I remember is like all the teachers were selling drugs. Like that was really common as well. I actually went back to the school version of one of these when, later in life. And it turned out one of the students burned it down. So that's what happened to that. Oh, also fun fact, other kids tried to kill me at each of them. At the school version, my roommate actually got expelled for trying to poison me. And then, fortunately, he was incredibly incompetent. And then at the wilderness version, some kid idiotically signaled to me that he was going to attack me that night. So I just like made my bed look like I was sleeping in it and I was elsewhere. And he attacked it with a shovel. But, I was fine the next day, obviously, because I wasn't in it. So after years of doing daily episodes, that's all you're going to get out of me about that point in my life. Hiding short snippet at the end of an unrelated episode. Because I really hate trauma narratives. I think that they are incredibly toxic. So, I was at a very young age, sort of forced to make things work on my own. And I look at people who just go to like boarding school and report trauma, right? Like, and I'm just like, what a pussy you are, right? Like,
Well, they're only hurting themselves too. Like that's a real sad thing.
And when I know, like personally, even though I went through all this, it probably would have been worse living with my parents, given, what they were going through during this time period of my life. And so like, and people can be like, well, then why don't you have like a negative? And I'm like, look at who I am as an adult. Like, why would I contextualize any of that traumatically? Like, I feel like I was forged to be super strong and flexible and those are all positive things. Why would I go back and re-internalize those negatively? And people have been like in the comments, they go, Malcolm, you just don't understand like parental abuse. But I'm like, I'm pretty sure like within my family, we do. Not only do you have my situation, but I was also talking about how my dad forgave his grandfather after taking out $1 million in debt under my dad's name without telling him in the 80s. In the 80s too. So a lot more money today. And at the time, my dad was making $70K a year. So he was quite boned if he couldn't figure out how to make things work. And he patched that up as well. And so a lot of these people who are like, oh, it's not that I don't think that there aren't ever actual cases of like very, very serious abuse. I look at somebody like Ayla. But even if you're looking at somebody like Ayla, this might be worth a whole separate episode. She was seriously beat, like very, very serious. Not like our kids, where it's just like light, like reorientation thing.
No, she was also like ritually beaten, like where I'm going to take you to the thing or like hit you with the switcher paddle. Like I think they had a leather thing that they would use. Or something.
Yeah. And she even says, despite all of that, despite how bad all that is, I still think the period I went to public school was more abusive than the physical punishment. And that's just recontextualization. This is is it worse to be severely beaten occasionally? Or is it worse to be, as she described public school, it turned her life into a filler episode. Is it worse?
It was like being in a show where it's all filler episodes, which
yes.
is such a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Having our agency taken away and having to sit in a chair and listen to a teacher all day. Like, and for people like us, we'd be like, oh, the second is worse. So even with people like her, when people are like, oh, you don't understand trauma. Well, clearly Ayla does understand any traditional form of trauma, right? Like, yeah, and with that, she's still like, and public school is worse. The reason I make these comparisons is I'm trying to show that people who have experienced different types of childhood trauma are able to recontextualize it, even if it is quite severe by modern standards. Whether it's Ayla, where I don't think you could experience more physical abuse other than like having a limb ripped off, or I don't really think there is any higher level of financial abuse than having $1 million taken out under your name without your permission. Or in my background, the point I'm making here is even people who have undergone quite severe things are able to recontextualize them. And in some cases, it may be impossible. For example, in each one of these 3 cases, there was no sexual abuse happening. And so it may be impossible in that instance. But the reason I use these 3 cases is they represent a wide diversity of types of abuse in which every individual was able to recontextualize. And I just don't see it negatively, like even a little bit, because I really like who I am today. And I feel like all these things contributed to that.
I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you don't, interpret things in a bad way. It's too bad. And in the end, though, this is so part of our philosophy. What matters is what you're going to do about something. It's up to you. It's your internal locus of control that matters. And yes, there are exogenous factors in life, but that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what you can control. And you can just control how you react to things and what you do about what you were dealt.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love you to death, Simone.
Love you too.
And you
Go to
are
sleep, please.
an amazing woman.
You're an amazing man. And I love you. And I hope you feel better.
And thank you for, having such a, you had severe anorexia. You almost died. This is how you lost your uterus stopped functioning normally. You had severe depression during your youth.
And nothing bad happened. I had an idyllic and perfect childhood.
Nothing
I
bad,
just
yeah, no,
made
no,
it hard for myself.
But I don't think you contextualize. I mean, you do contextualize like college is bad.
Not
I mean,
really. No.
I remember actually even today, I was thinking about my last day of high school, and I was like, I didn't realize how much better life would get after high school.
Oh
Like,
man, it's so much.
marginally
It's
better.
so hard being a kid. Like everything, like high school's the worst, I think. But like, it's just rough being a kid in general. You don't get to choose anything. You have no control. Everyone else determines where you go, when you go, what you get to do, what you get to eat. It sucks. I hated it. I love being an adult. It just gets so much better.
We can construct a way that our kids can live a more adult-like lifestyle.
Oh, we do. We like very, very carefully listen to what they want and we let them do it. That's why we don't do everyone sits down at the table for dinner. Everyone does dinner exactly the way that they want. I think we're pretty good about that.
Thank you, Simone.
Thank you, Malcolm. I love you.
Love you too.
All right, I'm going to be quiet when I come into your room. So
Now the bit on what Simone learned about what people meant when they said I looked soy from the comment section where we had further dug into this topic.
on the subject of you being soy, just to follow up, this is just a constant thing with our channel. We had asked about it, and a lot of our audience had explained to us, or especially to me, because this is a question: why is Malcolm soy? And all of the things they described as soy, I'm like, okay, so you're just describing everything I find attractive in men. And I think it's important for our audience to recognize that, at least when it comes to terminally online nerdy women, who I imagine are actually pretty good matches for most of you, if you're watching this channel, this is the type of woman you'd probably want, are disproportionately attracted to traits that you consider to be soy. And by trying to eliminate those traits from your appearance, comportment, etc.
What traits are you talking about here?
Skinnier, paler, nerdier, glasses, expressive.
Yeah, I had this realization. What they were actually talking about is what the difference is between the 2 dive teams in the Sum 41 music video into Deep is. No, I can see why somebody would see those things as soy, and like I would understand.
It
My
shows up as
misunderstanding is that I saw that not being soy was about trying to be like more attractive, and I
no. I
realized
think it really has to do with appealing to men, and maybe a very specific subset of women, but not the type of women that I think.
gone over them before on where men perceive what women want.
Yeah,
Or because what they do is they look at what women want for random sexual encounters,
yeah.
and they conflate that with what women want in a long-term partner.
Well, but also like art. I think that's really interesting too, because I'm also not the type of person who's looking at men from the perspective of like, who do I want to bang once? I've never looked at men that way. It's only been from a long
Well,
time.
no, and this is why I think that you have this perception, because I think
Uh-huh.
they're actually getting data when they go out to bars for like the women who will do the one-night stands and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that. The data that they're getting is from the women who are interested in just like somebody.
But aren't they like when it comes to getting married, don't they want to attract like slightly
Right, but
less
the data
promiscuous?
is wrong because they don't
Yeah.
go and date the long-term chaste women. They,
Yeah.
they're not out there looking for the nerd women on the fandom board. Like when I, started dating you, it was just pure nerd. It was like anime cons were all of our dates, we
Yeah, your second proposed date was to watch My Little Pony. Not even anime, like even more intense than that. Just so
it was, and for me, this was about flexing. Like, you show me your big knife collection, like flexing, yes, martial culture. And I flex to you that I don't care about societal norms and I don't care about judgment, which is a thing in our culture, right?
so nice. That is better. Thank you.
Today is a great day to be sick.
This is true. And then you'll feel so good. You'll feel so much better. Trust me. Though
Better yet, you still seem to be lumbering a bit.
Well, I'm pregnant, though. And I'm going to be like this for another 4 months.
Okay, well, we'll get started on this one. This is a fun one.
Yeah. He underwrite his money. Towards the money, Kate.
Do not peel those off for Cape, Octavian. You're breaking it. It doesn't matter. You're breaking it. Stop it.